Hello everyone, Richard Miller. This is what Australia's like, right? And it's kind of new for me. I'm 6 months down under, and wow, life moves fast here. Maybe it's just a different point of view, right? It's a chance to, I really can't say why my life has moved so rapidly from another hemisphere, the southern hemiphere. That's just a bunch of words really that don't mean anything. I mean, here I am somewhere on the planet Earth, and I'm looking at myself, looking at what I do, and looking at how the world works, and how my community works, and how my family works, and how I work with people. So basically I'm looking at friendship, and what's it take to be a friend, and what comes up when I feel unfriendly. And so then a good way to do that is to get together with a few people and see what happens. And so today we're with a couple of great people. Help me welcome AbiTiki. So hi, Abi.
Hi, how are you, Richard? It's really lovely to see your face.
So you're an Australian, so you're not going through all the things I'm going through, you know. This is just just home territory with you, right?
Only on an internal level, not so much in the external world. Same.
Yeah. And so our other contributor is Jerome Pindell. So hello, Jerome. How are you?
Hello, Richard and Abby. It's great to see you both.
It is.
I've really marveled at what the internet can do and what Skype can do, right? When you see somebody else, another person, somehow, I don't know, I believe it's different than just seeing what they wrote or reading their book or following them. Well, I suppose if you're reading, it's got to be more intellectual. If you're seeing somebody, you can feel a little bit stronger. I don't know. What is that? Does that resonate with either of you?
Having spoken to a few people that I've only read their words before on Skype, hearing the voices does break down a certain kind of resistance, and seeing the faces goes a deeper level again, and in some way it's like this is how we've evolved to meet face to face, and somehow the whole body responds to that with a certain kind of joy. It's just really beautiful to see the faces of people you've been interacting with, so it just brings it to another level. You can get a sense of people through what they write, and a whole different sense through voice, and different again through seeing their faces. So it's all good, but it is different, a little different, yeah.
A big difference between reading what Abby writes on ETTV and feeling connected to her, and yet now I can see her, so there's a whole other dimension that gets added to that.
Right. So as we grow, as we see ourselves more, I guess we have a kind of a goal to become more human, whatever that total human experience is, right? And then part of that is accepting accepting other humans, right? And somehow here we are. That's probably the learning, right?
Yeah, definitely. One of the things I have noticed since starting on ETTV, and at the same time as I started down the whole awakening, whatever you want to call it, is that there's been a deepening of a sense of just basic trust, and bringing that basic trust to my interaction with other people has changed everything. And I think it's one of the essential ways that I have found of meeting life and my own self, all the parts of myself, and also other people, just unconditionally trusting whatever appears is fine. It's been huge for me.
Repeat that some, say a little bit more from different angles. Of basic trust is just meeting what appears, and well, it's very important. It sounds like something we should talk about from a few different angles.
Well, it's the minute I start putting it into words, it becomes conceptual, but it really isn't. It's not trusting in people being a certain way, it's not trusting in my ability to be a certain way, and it's not trusting in circumstances being a certain way. It's not conditional trust. It's more of a change in orientation towards all of life. Just that it's basically benign, and there and just a feeling that I'm held and that I'm safe and that I receive everything I need despite the circumstances. And to bring unconditional trust to other people is just for me to trust that they are as they are in this moment, and that is part of purpose, and it makes it a lot more fun.
Yeah, those words to me, they resonate. They're huge. They're huge. Just to say that I'm safe, how can you come to the idea that I'm safe, right? I mean, for so long in our lives, like we feel like I'm not safe,
To me, that's just part of the whole spiritual journey. Is you begin as a human being, and you have all these conditions, feelings, responses, actions, reactions. As you move through the spiritual path, is to let go of all of those conditioned responses, and ultimately to come around to the same point you started, that you are essentially living in a third-dimensional reality. You exist as a human being, but you no longer have all the conditions and attachments that cause you to feel unsafe.
Yeah, and it is back to where you started as a child. You just felt entirely and completely a part of everything and connected to everything and in everything and not separate from anything. And I think a huge underpinning of the ego is basic lack of trust, because it's what leads us to feel that we're not held and we're not safe, and that therefore we have to fight with and manipulate and change and arrange everything around us to try and achieve that.
Maybe the whole thing, ego, is just a lack of trust. The lack of trust is the so-called ego, right? Could we just simplify it like that?
All of the ego behaviors grow out of that sense of disconnection and lack of trust in things being okay, and that's how it appears to me. It certainly was how I lived most of my life, was absolute lack of trust. I was a compulsive planner, and compulsive planning is all about trying to make sure that I'm safe, because I didn't feel the way that I was held by the universe. And now I wake up every morning and I have a whole universe. I am a whole universe, and there's just this feeling that, not even a feeling, it's like the way you walk around in your body and you, without even thinking about it or feeling into it, without any conceptual activity at all, you know that your body will interact a certain way with the laws of physics. You don't trust that in the world of form, you just trust that in some deep way internally. And so when you open your eyes in the morning, if you can see, you don't go, I trust that there's going to be vision. And it's the same with the kind of trust in the universe, that the universe is benign and that it's always held me and that I've always been fine. And the evidence for that is, I look around, I've got a cushion, I've got a glass of water, I'm in this beautiful safe space, and I could easily easily lose sight of that by thinking, well, what have I got to do today, and is my water the right temperature, and is my cushion comfortable, and actually I'm only safe in here because I've got this cushion, and the minute I go outside I'm not safe, and is the cushion arranged properly, and is there something I really should be doing rather than sitting here? Am I doing it right? Is it okay that I'm doing it because of the state of the world? Does it justify it for me to be here and be safe and comfortable? And basically, once you start doing that, there is nowhere to stop.
In so many ways, those are all things that we've learned from infancy all the way up. Everything, when infants come in full of trust, full of acceptance of the reality of their universe, and that everything is going to be taken care of. And then little by little, if the baby's not held, if the baby is abused in any particular way, or mishandled in some way, even as simply as how roughly the diapers get changed, those things influence the child's response and relationship to the universe and to the world at large. And as we grow up, we learn more and more and more, and we keep adding the snowball to the snowball of all of those feelings of mistrust,
of need to be different, of need to control, of need, you know,
Yeah.
just of
So
need, right?
There's like two levels that Jerry was talking about, which is a lack of trust that we will be held, which we learn, and then we are taught a lack of trust in ourselves, that the way we are in this moment is fine, and that we should be different, we should change, we should feel, do, be something other than what we actually are in this moment. So there are two levels that we learn this mistrust, and then layer that into whatever becomes our personal ego pattern.
Abby and I learned to trust one another through multiple dialogue online, but it was just the written word. We had no visual connection. But through exchanges, we learned that we thought the same way, had many similar interests, that we liked a lot of similar things. So we learned a certain basic trust. But now we have a whole other level at which we add the visual cues. We get so much information from seeing somebody, from just witnessing them, witnessing their face. The first time that I saw Eckhart on stage, I hadn't heard him speak ever, but I watched him walk onto stage, and I knew in that instant that he was somebody that I could relate to, that I could trust, without him even speaking. So, you know, there are so many layers of how we in this dimension receive information, accept it, process it, and move with it, or don't.
Yeah, exactly. There is something seems to radiate from people who have that orientation of trusting, and that's one of the things that I like about Eckhart, that he, just without even speaking, he does radiate that to the people that come to speak to him. He doesn't radiate any kind of suspicion or discomfort.
Well, he's not a challenging guy. He doesn't have a challenging demeanor, right? And he's a guy that, in a way, what is he, kind of like has a humble demeanor or something, like, say, I want to know about this guy, right? You know, because he doesn't seem to challenge anybody.
Yeah, open curiosity. It's interesting. It's I don't know if it's even a humble demeanor, and I think it probably is a part of his personality, and has been even before he had the awakening experience that he did that changed everything. I think he comes across as a kind of person that wasn't particularly pushing forward in the world anyway. But the impression I get is that he was uncomfortable with a lot of life, and that he went into situations not trusting that things would work out well. In fact, he has said that his main orientation was things never work out for me, or things always go wrong for me. And so I guess trust comes in there as well, and he's now trusting life and trusting the moment that he's in. And it does resonate. But I mean, despite what people are resonating with their body, I have found that having read a person's words and finding a resonance with that, I'm automatically more open when I see them, and there's just this welcoming and no reaction on that form level that I might have had of maybe checking them out or something, or there's just a willingness to meet. I don't know if that's just me or what comes across in the words, but it's a really nice way to meet people. It feels really nice in my body.
So when you're saying, when you read somebody's words, right? And then that's something that Jerome said too, because he said, I already trust Abby because we've had a lot of interchanges on the web, and we tend to see things eye to eye, you know, we have an agreement. And so then the words kind of limit us to agree and disagree, right? And understand. We're trying to agree with something, or we find out we're disagreeing with something, or we think we understand something. And then from that, we have what we could call, we can honor that person, right? And we can respect that person in some way. Okay, this might be all mental, all full of judgment and stuff like that, but I mean, that's how we're limited to when we're reading a book, right?
Well, in a way, it's yes and no, because you learn that you can honor that person with or without agreement. The agreement is not required. It's just, you learn to just meet them. And I know that both Jerry and I have a bit of an interest in some of the old Zen dialogues and the old Zen koans. And one of the things I love personally about them is that they're all about people who have lived together for a while, learned a little bit about each other. They may have different personalities, different ways of meeting the world, and they've learned to just be with that and honor each other anyway, with or without similarities. They've just learned through interaction, all their hard edges of their interaction has been knocked off, and they're willing to meet each other. And all those dialogues are about people meeting in ordinary, everyday situations with the backdrop of the teaching that they're interested in, which is much the same with something like the ET TV forum, where we all share an interest one way or another in this existence, the incredible mystery of this existence. And there's a way of learning to meet people with or without the agreement there, just like you said, just to respect and honour them as they are in that moment and the way that they can express.
What do you think, Jerome? It seems like that's a very mature outlook, you know, where you don't have to agree, you don't even have to understand, and respect can still be there. I mean, if the world would be a different place.
Well, it's a lot more fun. If everyone was like me, I probably wouldn't be necessary.
Yeah. Is that something you came to, Jerome, is that something you came to early on, you know, to be able to meet people without agreeing with them? Or is that something that's kind of like...
Well, my take on that is, and I can't say that it's something that I came to early on, but it's something that has really grown and developed over the course of my time here, and that's to recognize that, well, the analogy that I always use is of the human body. I know that my liver cells don't belong in my lung. I know that my lung cells don't belong somewhere out in my skin. The whole of humanity functions in its entirety as a living, shall we say, a living organism. But I may not resonate completely with a certain group or a certain type or a certain personality. So But that doesn't mean that I reject them or don't accept that what it is that they have to offer to the totality doesn't work for me. So I can be happy and comfortable having them, relating to them at whatever level that I may need to interact with them, but I may not necessarily want to spend an evening with them, for instance. So there are many levels of trust in a sense, but trust also at a level of trusting my own instincts in knowing that this is somebody I'd like to spend more time with versus this is somebody that I happily engage with at the level that we both resonate at that particular moment.
You know, we talk about resonate, right? And then we say that we pick up energies, right? And
Yeah.
I think that a lot of learning, especially as an infant, is kind of like by imitation, right? So then we imitate the content of other people's activities, but we also imitate their emotions, and we imitate their moods. You know, if everybody's frustrated or depressed, or, you know, not always 100%, but I mean, I suppose this is what we could call the collective consciousness, is just that
Yeah.
the way we learn so much by imitating. And the way we fall into resonance, we could say we're in a room that has a harsh energy, or we're on a trafficy street where people are blowing their horns, and you know, we're frazzled by it somehow. We're susceptible to it, right? I mean, it has a power over us, you know, and we can just say it's energy, but somehow it's also just it's this part of humanity that just imitates, right? And okay, we can call it reflex. We could call it resonates.
Yeah, yeah. It's the whole, we are monkey see, monkey do. And we learn what our culture finds acceptable. Like, we learn that there's this, that it's fine to project our discomfort with what someone's saying onto them, and believe that they should be different, which separates us from the truth, which is that what they're expressing is they're standing in their own experience, and they're expressing that, and it's part of the whole experience, and the whole thing is perfect.
Yeah.
And nothing needs to change.
Oh, yeah.
And then as we get older...
Well, I mean, you know, it could also say, okay, nothing needs to change. I'm always projecting my discomfort, and I always find that I'm projecting it to a guy in a blue with a badge on, right? And we say something maybe ought to change, right? Because that projection is getting me into trouble, you know. I'm not really going the way I want to, so something might have to change, right?
Well, that's exactly it. We learn through experiencing how that way of operating feels in us, and after a certain amount of repeating something, we learn the difference between what feels good to us and what creates suffering. And that, exactly like you said, it's we live and learn, and nothing is lost, and it's all part of it.
I like what you said, Richard, about the child. My experience of having been a parent allowed me to really watch and perceive the way children not only absorb energy and learn not only through imitation, but they just know. A child can walk into a room of complete strangers, a whole group of adults, and don't know who to walk up to and who not to walk up to. They just somehow get at a deeper level of that. As they progress, their experiences tell them why that person's not. You know, they may put projections out there that say, oh, that I don't like that person because. But that's not always the totality of the answer, is it? It really is the collective consciousness. It's the collective energy of all of their experiences, both subconscious and nonverbal and verbal, and experiential, so many, all of those experiences collect into a large whole that influence our responses.
You know, I guess what I was suggesting, Jerome, was that if we notice that we're reflecting or resonating or imitating those words I was using, we can notice that that's not personal to us. And that could be a great value to realize that that's not even us that's behaving or that thinking in that way or feeling in that way. And then maybe we can have compassion with it. We could say that's the state of the world that I live in, right? And that's the state of the family and the culture that I grew up in. And then if I can somehow see through it, you know, solve this riddle that I've been handed as an infant, maybe the whole planet will benefit by my insights. And you could just we were talking about noticing, right? Noticing how we reflect, and if you can notice it in a way where it's not me, you know, it's everybody's doing this thing. Okay, we say I see myself in everybody, but we see everybody in myself too, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, yeah.
We have enough similarities within all of our experiences to say that, yeah, we all sort of look the same. And yet at the same time, I know from working with people who have come to the United States from other cultures, some from Australia. I'm working most recently with a Danish woman today. I saw a woman who grew up in Haiti. There are cultural responses and reactions that are just different enough that they influence her, and I have to be mindful of not only of her responses, but I have to be mindful of what I say.
So then, human response, you know, it seems to go in two directions, you know, because sometimes we say we need to be harder, we need to be more decisive, we need to put our imprint on our world in a stronger way, and then other times we say we need to be softer, you know, we need to receive more. We need to understand that, you know, this is not really a face-to-face confrontation, but it's like a cultural conditioning or something that I can see in a way that I don't have to make it a warfare. And which way should we go? Should we put a stronger imprint on the world, or should we be softer?
I think the way we need to be, we already are. But I very much agree with what you said, Richard, about we learn to be more compassionate with ourselves when we see where we're coming from, if with just a little bit of observation, and that is really beneficial to all of us, because if we're more compassionate with ourselves, then we can easily look at others and think, well, you know, I can be more compassionate with them as well, and it just arises automatically. But the more compassionate you become for yourself, without interfering with yourself, like in an I know that sounds strange, but in an unconditional way, where you don't constantly wonder about, should I be more this, should I be more that, and just allow yourself to be as you are in this moment, that flows on to everyone that you meet. You're able to meet them as they are, and it takes a bit of sensitivity, and I think that that's what Jerry's talking about in meeting people from our culture and from other cultures, just sensitivity for yourself as you are, and that flows into sensitivity for other people as they are, without demanding that they be more like people from my culture or more like me, or in any way less like themselves in this moment.
You know, I think that's what we're doing right now.
I agree with you, Abby, that, you know, I think that that's really where I probably learned the most, was learning how to be compassionate with myself. And then I found myself far more able to be compassionate with everybody else, and with whether it's craziness or not that's going on around me. It was so much easier to just accept that that was the reality that they were trying to cope with, but it was all inside them. Because I could see my own dysfunctional reality happening inside of me. So the more compassionate I became with that, the more easily I was compassionate with others.
You know, how did you see that? How did you see the dysfunctionality within yourself, you know? And I have a theory on it, which would mean that you gave it less meaning, you know? In other words, when you give feelings and thoughts that arise in yourself a lot of meaning, then it really sticks it and makes it important, right? And when you start to give less and less meaning to what goes through your head, then it softens. That's my theory.
Yeah, and it becomes less relevant. It's still there, and you're not trying to push it away. It just somehow becomes less relevant in meeting yourself and in meeting others.
Yeah, well, less relevant also means less interest. It's not so interesting anymore, right?
Yeah, it doesn't hook you. It doesn't hook you as being so huge and important. It's just here, and it'll pass, and you just meet it in the moment that it's there, knowing that it will pass. Everything's shifting.
You know, Anthony DeMello talks about that to a certain degree, and it's a lot of what he taught me, and listening to him years ago was to understand that if I had a reaction, in other words, if my emotions came up strongly, then there was something being triggered inside of me. The other person may have been a trigger, but I had a reaction. And that reaction within me was a way of holding up the mirror to say, I have something to look at there. I don't know if that's where you were going, Richard and Abby, but that's...
No, that's where I was going in a way.
Popped into my head.
No, I was going right there because I remember back a ways in the conversation, Jerome, and you said, if we just learn to give up some of our conditioning, right? And I was thinking, that's a good one. How do we give up our conditioning, you know? We go out there and just say, I'm getting rid of your conditioning, and it doesn't really work, right? And so then I thought, well, the way to give a hint on that is to give less meaning to these things that are happening, so-called to us, you know? But these things that we recognize that are happening in our sphere. And as that has less meaning, then the conditioning has less attaching points, and then it becomes less interesting. And I thought that would be a good hint to actually move past conditioning and collectiveness, collective conditioning.
It does also come back to trust, because if you're able to trust yourself and that your experience is totally okay, and that what's going on with you is okay, and somehow a part of purpose, then you're able to become more still with yourself and with what's going on with you, and that feeds into your being able to more easily observe your conditioning as it plays out without reacting. And as you do that, you don't have to call the conditioning removalist. It just starts to show itself, and in the seeing, it starts to become almost more amusing than terrifying, and So you meet it with a bit of lightness and hopefully a bit of humour, and then you can bring that to the other people that you meet as well.
Kind of respond a little bit to that, just in terms of how I've tried to cope with the notions of paying attention to my own conditioning versus responding to somebody who may say, I'm me, being me, made somebody feel a certain way. And on the one hand, I'll have compassion for the fact that somehow I have triggered a response in them. And on the other hand, I look at it and I say, so what was my intention behind that? How do I feel about that? Were they right? You know, it requires a very quickly monitoring yourself from a variety of perspectives, sort of marching around the statue of yourself in a way and seeing yourself from a variety of different angles. Sometimes people will say, oh, you're this way, and I'll think about it and see whether or not I have a reaction to how they perceive me. If I have no reaction to it, then I know it's not me, it's something that's triggered in them. If I do have a reaction to that, then I know that somehow they're probably right.
Yeah, that's brilliant in a way. That's, you know, it's a brilliant signpost that if you can look at that in a dispassionate way, what your reaction is, and not make an excuse about it, maybe that could be a
not
real.
Always so easy.
Yeah, it could be a real signpost, right? It's a skill to work on and to try to develop.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that, because something that comes up, I notice whenever I express the way I feel about unconditional trust, is that people sometimes automatically react with questioning me in terms of assuming that that's going to lead to a mass breakout of bad behaviour, and that it somehow exempts me from behaving in a caring and self-aware way, and in that there's a little bit of, I've noticed a little bit of reaction that people may feel that it could be used as a way of excusing uncaring behaviour. Oh, you know, everything's fine, nothing matters, you can do whatever you like. But I don't find that. I actually find, I've been wondering, because I've had a few people just in discussion talking about that, and from standing in my experience, it's quite the opposite. If I am meeting you with total trust, however you are is fine, then how does that feel compared to how does it feel if I meet you with distrust and suspicion, and an assumption that you're going to act badly in one way or another?
Somehow, you know, like when I'm adding up what you say, Abby, like I say, that's a result, you know, that when you're cool, you know, then you trust, right? But not to say trust or distrust and put that to somebody, they're not going to be able to make those two choices, right? Because the trust comes from some other, something else that you've already let go, right? Where, which is, we call fear, but, you know, the reasoning behind fear, or the belief structure that says that something's not adequate. So anyhow, to me, you're saying all these great things, but they're all about the result of being level-headed and equanimous, right? They're not really a way to get there. How did you fall into that? How did you do it? That's the question.
Through many, many years of not trusting.
That way.
and seeing that my lack of trust play out in the world. And also feeling how it feels inside me not to be trusting it. Once
Right.
the noise and the mind and the chaos of wanting everything to be different and trying to control and manipulate the world started to fall away, I started to become really aware of how the way I was operating in the world actually felt. And that was huge, because I assumed that the way I was operating in the world was the right way, a good way, the culturally accepted way, the way to be, and yet I became really aware that just operating in that way was just painful in every part of my system to me. And it played out probably in being painful for others, meeting me as I was completely lacking in trust and in basic trust.
Yeah. You know, what comes to me is like when you said the way to be, you know, like that's totally accepted and that's the way to be. And so
Yeah,
well, I could just say that
you won't trust people. Yeah.
I'm just saying what we're up to here. And when we're up to on Every Night Here and on the Eckhart Tolle Forum and in our own relationships, we're up to creating a new way to be, right? We're undermining the old way to be, and we're investigating it and doubting it, and just saying, well, what would be new here? You know, what good is this outdated? Is this something we used to do for various reasons, and is the circumstances still the same? You know, we're looking for a new way to be. I think that's important to say that so that we can, you know, I mean, we tend to honor traditions and honor a lot of old things, and maybe we should be kind of excavating and poking around at them and seeing what really is there.
It's interesting. I do find that really relevant, because in talking with people who are kind of questioning, it's crazy just to trust life, you know. I mean, I could run off and do this, and this could happen, and that could happen, and people could start acting badly, and the world could become a mess. And well, to me, I look out the window and or watch the news, and that's business as usual. That is the old way to be. And that old way to be has evolved out of not trusting and feeling that we do have to change and manipulate and order everything because it's not right the way it is. And back to what you were saying earlier, Richard, that we should be more forceful or less forceful or whatever. Somehow we feel that we have to have our fingers on this, that it's not holding us as it is. And what it comes back to, I think, is that we haven't learned how to hold ourselves, and we're expecting the world to do it for us as adults, still looking for what we maybe didn't get as children, or feel that we didn't get or don't get or can't get unless we run our egos after everything.
Again, what you say is so right on to me, you know, when you say we're expecting the world to do it for us, you know. So that's totally a belief that the world is it's something else out there, you know. That's another thing out there, and actually that I can escape it, you know. I can just withdraw and come in, and just you know, cut it all out, right? And in this day and age, things are moving so fast, you know. Like if somebody's reactor burns down, the radiation floats over to us, right? And somehow we're together on so many more things. Now, we're talking about trust, we're talking about rebuilding our view of the world and our view of our fellow man, we're talking about respect and so on. We're speaking a lot of mature, really, I would call it mature, whatever mature means. It just means it comes later instead of before, right? It takes a while to get there. So somehow we have a lot of mature ideas, and somehow, I mean, how is this, I'll ask Jerome, how is this affecting like your life? Like, because these mature ideas somehow have to reflect back to you, and also they have to be a joy to the people around you. And somehow, if the world is ever to work, each one of our spheres has to grow, and the only way it can grow is with our participation and our engagement in the world. And I don't know, are you getting more engaged?
That's a really interesting question, Richard, because my history in my 20s here in the United States, I was in a rather extreme political activist. So that was in the 60s, and the 60s and 70s during the Vietnam War era. And I was very active, and I was very, shall we say, against many of the structures. Now, as I've gotten older and become more pragmatic, and I watch not only how I've watched myself and how I engage with the world, I no longer feel the need to engage with the structures that, to sort of piggyback a little bit on some things that Eckhart has said about structures ultimately are doomed to failure. We can look at the churches and all of the religious institutions. We can look at all of the governmental institutions, and in particular here in the United States, but even in Europe and all over the world. All of the way in which governments have assumed power, have assumed that they know better and that they can take care of it, those things are falling away. So my own interactions now, as I've begun to trust myself more, I watch and observe what's going on around me, but I don't engage with it per se. In other words, I don't accept that the fear that is driving the forces that are dissolving those structures. I'm more successful now in my life, in the things that I've chosen to do, than I have ever been. And simultaneously, as everybody is worried about having enough money, losing their jobs, everything else, my business is actually growing. I'm making more money. I'm not engaging with the insanity of the world, but I am observing it, but in a detached way. And as a result, many of the people who come to see me, all of their fears and agitation seem to just quiet down. So I hope that answers your question, but that's really how I observe my engagement with the world, is to be much, not that I'm Eckhart, but to be much the way in which I perceive him, and I've perceived all of the spiritual teachers that I've ever been with, that I've admired, if I could use that word.
Your response
is merely by their presence.
Your response is pretty complete, and but it does bring up some questions, because you were saying that in the 60s you were a political activist, and you said you were against many of the structures, and you were engaged in that againstness, right? And now we're saying that we're more open, and we're softer, and we're more receiving, and we're more respectful. And then I'm not suggesting to be engaged to be against structures. And then you also mentioned that you're trusting that these structures are dissolving at their own rate, and it's impossible that that this is not going to, this dissolution is not going to occur, But I'm suggesting being engaged for something, not against something, right? And I'm saying that just because these things are, just because these structures are dissolving doesn't mean there's going to be a paradise that's left over when they're gone. In fact, there's going to be total chaos.
Right.
There's going to be total chaos unless somebody's there to kind of build a replacement institution, right? And or at least build a model of one, right? And so I'm saying engaging in small things that work, right? And that could be just some kind of community volunteering. That could be working with prisons or orphans, or just law enforcement, or working with community and what works, Just and that's the engagement I'm talking about, or just engaging in the Eckhart Tolle form and talking, hinting to people that they can notice things, right? And they can notice their anxiety, and they can notice their what is it? You know, their personalization, and they can notice their how they feel that the world's impinging upon them, and they can see it in a less personal way, and maybe still be engaged, and not with everything, but just with what's natural. I mean, like, I can make videos, so then I can engage in making videos. You know, it seems real simple for me, and
right.
And that's a little different, isn't it? Than I'm suggesting more engagement, not less. I'm suggesting building things that work.
I engage with everyone that I need to engage with. In other words, and sometimes I'm forced to engage with. When I go into hospitals, I'm always very respectful of all of the staff. They're not used to that. They're not used to being questioned, but in a respectful way. They're not used to acceptance of their level of knowledge by most people. What we see so much in our world is a confrontational attitude. And so engagement has come something to a certain extent to mean that engagement carries with it a quality of confrontation. And that's where I've changed. All of my engagement with the world today now is far more respectful than it was in my youth.
That's beautifully spoken. That's so beautifully spoken, because I think that we're able to be lulled into the idea that, okay, these confrontational, confrontations anyhow are tiring, and we want to get finished with it, and so then we stop engaging, right? And we think that because we're not engaging, we're non-confrontational. But I'm just saying that that's not the case. That we really have to engage and be non-confrontational, because that has meaning, right? Mm-hmm. Just backing off has no meaning, right? And it doesn't really spread. It's not a model. It's not a role model for any kids or anybody, any other people. I mean, somebody's got to show how we can live together and respect each other, and also listen to each other and allow each other to express our truth for the moment without freaking out and trying to dominate it or suppress it. I mean, somebody's got to model this kind of behavior. That's what I'm talking about. That could be also in institutions, right?
Right.
What is back?
Actually. Anthony DeMello talked about a book called Summerhill, and he used an example within Summerhill that said that the whole model of the school was set up that all of the children could do exactly what it is they wanted to do, as long as it didn't impinge on the freedom, the engagement with the rest of the school, of any other child. So the child had to take personal responsibility, and he said what was very interesting was even the most rebellious, within 6 months, ultimately came around to engaging with the entirety of the school and not simultaneously not impinging on the rights of any of the other individual, unique and individual expression. I think we've lost sight of that.
Yeah.
Abby, you probably have something to say.
I've been enjoying the discussion, and I find some interesting parallels, because I was also quite strongly involved with activism and did a lot of protesting and a lot of information bombing and letter drops and actions, and sat around in rooms with people plotting underground actions to overthrow the system, and did a lot of that with an energy of anger and frustration and fear for the future, and no trust that things would ever work out because things are the way they are. And friends of mine were in a band, and one of the lyrics of one of the songs that they produced, which impacted me pretty hard, was, and aren't we so concerned about the world we live in? We lust for security, get it and give in. And that hit me pretty hard. And I don't see that I've become disengaged from life. I'm just engaging with life from a completely different place. I don't go out telling people I don't go out putting up posters that people should eat organic food, but I grow my own, and anyone who comes in contact with me or comes to my house gets to eat some. And that is, I don't want to make my mark on the world anymore. I think the world has quite a few marks on it already. And I like the Zen way.
But Abby, is it?
How do you express peace? I express peace by working in my garden with an open heart and peace radiating from me, and sharing what I grow with others in very, very small ways, in ways that the world would consider to be completely insignificant, which is actually extremely nourishing, and also has removed all my negative energy, which I was pouring out into the world from the collective energy field. And I don't feel in any way that I am less engaged with life. I'm engaged with life completely, in a completely different way, from a completely different space.
So isn't that making a mark on the world? I mean, you said you don't want to make a mark on the world, but you're totally making a mark. And when you said, when you were an activist, you noticed the energy of all your action was anxious and fearing.
I tell you, Richard, I went to peace meetings that ended with people standing up and screaming at each other.
I mean, isn't that the difference? That you've just realized that you're not going to be motivated by, your call to action is not going to be anxiety-based, and it's not going to be hostile, and that you do want to make a mark on the world.
Richard, it's an attachment to an outcome. There's a big difference when you have an attachment to an outcome versus living from within and engaging with the world in a compassionate way. You automatically, by your engagement, change the nature of the experience that other people have. And there is no attachment to any particular outcome. Abby and I were both activists in different ways, and yet we also had an agenda in doing that. Mm-hmm. We don't have the agenda anymore.
Yeah. So you say an attachment to an outcome, but what about, can't you have an intention for an outcome? I mean, what's the difference between an intention and an attachment, right? You still work at it.
Definitely you should have an intention.
Future focus. If I can't be happy now, how can I expect to make the world happy in the future? Any part of the world happy, even my part of the world. It's starting with the wrong kind of premise, that if I am able to bring peace to this life in this moment, that is enough. And if I'm not, then I'm not. So if I have an angry moment, then that's there, and I don't add to that by getting angrier that I've been angry. So it's just a way of being responsible for my own space, my own energy, my own part. I don't presume to take responsibility on anyone else's part. I trust that if I came to it from a completely crazy, unhappy, mistrusting, unconscious place, then others can too. I give them the respect of having the same ability that I had. And if you had have known me when I was younger, you possibly wouldn't have, I don't know, you'd probably be surprised that I've come to that point of being able to reach peace. And so often we look at someone who's a little bit confused, and there's this urge to interfere somehow, and that is a lack of trust that they can, given enough space and enough acceptance and an unconditional ability to be who they are, where they are, when they are there, then somehow you're facilitating that to happen. Because the minute I push against what someone's doing, I create resistance in them. And I may actually be thinking I'm giving them a stepping stone, and I'm actually giving them a stumbling block by creating that resistance. So in that way, I am responsible for the energy that I put into the world.
Yeah.
And I honor and respect where other people are as much as possible.
I totally read you, you know. In other words, you're just receiving people. You're just giving them your attention and beholding them and just receiving them in the way they are, and not trying to push them into a slot. And somehow that's the greatest gift we can give.
Yeah, in a way.
To use Eckhart's phraseology, that's being in the now.
Being in the now without a judgment or without an expectation.
Right. You can still have an intention
For a result even, right?
Convey something to somebody, or to even to get somewhere or to do something, but the willingness to be present to how your intention has an impact on them or the situation that you move into allows you to shift that intention. And so your intention continually shifts. But if you have an attachment to getting somewhere in a certain way, by a certain route, and there's an obstacle there, then you're missing something in your engagement with the world.
In other words, that attachment is what disallows your ability to be present, because when you're attached and it looks like it's going the wrong way, your mind immediately kicks in and says, what can I do here? And so then the presence is gone, and then we're on our preconceptions, and then we're on our judgments, and then we're... So somehow that allowing, or somehow that it's a life that has a little bit less, it has the meaning in life is only what we give it, right? And the life that seems to be more a state of mystery and not so much our knowing of it should go this way, right? That's immediate kicking in the mind and kicking in the thoughts and kicking in, like, how am I going to get it there, right? And so then somehow that allowing, or that state where we don't give everything such an important meaning, then we can be less anxiety, and we can actually receive what's going on, receive other people the way they are.
Yeah, and it just takes a little bit of observation for me, standing in my own experience, to notice that every single wrong way that I went, every single crazy thing that I did, every moment of confusion I experienced, everything, the entire history of time and space has led up to this moment. And it was all required for me to find peace. It was all required. That's
a great testimony, Abby. That's a great testimony that says, just hang in there. It's everything's okay, even now, right?
It's more okay than I
great, Abby. That's
possibly
exactly
express.
what I would say. It would be really easy to look back and look at some of the things we've done and say, oh, I regret this, oh, I regret that. And yet the way Abby just put it is to say, you know what? Everything that I've experienced up to this point has made me who I am right now and brought me to this very moment in time, which feels great. So everything was good.
Yeah, and I was always fine, even when it looked like I wasn't. Very much looked like I wasn't. And I'm fine now. So, what's not to trust? And you know, I say this standing in my own experience. Haven't experienced other people's experience, except in the way that that everything is connected, but I'm not standing with them in the parts of their life which they have to experience by themselves. And so I can't say where they're coming from, where someone is coming from when they say something or do something. And I definitely can't see where they're going, because there is just them as they are in this moment, in my experience. And everything else on top of that, I would be adding.
Right.
You know, it appears to me that we're three people that have softened, right? Somehow we've softened and we've decided, hey, the confrontation route didn't work so good, you know, the hardness didn't work so good. Let me soften up a little bit and let other people in, let other things in, let occurrences in, and then just see if I can stay centered and just maybe even as an experiment, let's just say like, and which would be notice my anxiety level and notice how I react, right? And I'm saying all three of us are having some success with this experiment. And what I'm proposing, or what I guess I'm asking, or what somehow I feel that that this kind of I don't know if I should call it an attitude, or this kind of a way to carry ourselves couldn't have perhaps more traction with those around us, right? In other words, instead of just holding it in our secret space, you know, and saying that we're good, you know, and everybody else is wonderful. Somehow, let's put it out there, and I call that engagement, right? And I call that saying yes and stuff like that, because things just happen fast, right? I mean, I believe the whole world is just begging to have our interaction, you know, and there's every hour, every half hour, there's a place to say, sure, I can be part of that. I can smile here, you know, I can add to this interaction, I can add to that interaction, and so then I suppose you caught me red-handed on that one. And
you know, one of my spiritual teachers is very fond of saying, after discussing something that I just went through, he loves to say, so what did you learn? And to me, that's part of that sums up exactly the way I feel about all of my experiences within this dimension, within the physical reality, is to accept that everything that is happening to me is an opportunity to learn something, to take it in, to expand my awareness of how it is that I engage, and how that engagement can be shifted and changed through the learning process. And I, you know, sort of, at least I feel like that adds to what you were saying there, Richard.
Right. Well, I think we can even take that farther, you know, we can take that to the impersonal. You know, we don't have to story it in a grandiose and cosmic way, but we could just say that so much of life is not personal, which means collective, you know. And if we solve a problem, what did I learn? What did I learn doesn't necessarily mean our personal learning. It's like somehow a relief for everybody around us, right? And so in a way, it's a relief for the planet Earth. Right. And whether you need that story or not, but I mean, I think we don't have to have a story that just says I learned something from myself, and here I am just all about learning things. Somehow I'm handed a challenge that other people face too, and if I can solve it and somehow radiate that solution that I discovered, somehow that's of value to everybody. And I don't think that has to be just plain cosmic.
Different aspects of being.
Yeah.
And one of the ways that you express your being is that you're very enthusiastic about these dialogues. and sharing with others. And if that's the way that you are in the moment, then why question it? Really, why question it? If it feels, if you're not harming and you're actually doing what feels right to you, then surely that's part of what you are here to express.
Right.
And other people are here to express in different ways. For me personally, I don't have any solutions. And I look at human history and I can see that in a lot of places where people have had what they thought were very good solutions for human problems, there's somehow this way in which a gross interference with the way things are unfolding out of a deep lack of trust. You can see that you may have a solution, but you can't see the flow-on effects, and you can't see that one solution may cause other problems. And so
But also no solution cause other problems too, so what's the difference? I mean, if you say everything is right, then also your participation and your urges are right too, because that's part of everything.
Well, I don't say it's right. I just say it is what it is. I don't approach it in terms of right or wrong, because it's...
Well, people say everything is perfect. It is what it is. People say everything is perfect, right? So, okay, let's say it that way.
On one level, it is perfect. And on other levels, it is always changing. And I put a certain amount of my intention into this moment rather than future results. And I would ask myself maybe, what are my conditions for peace? Not in the future, but now. What am I putting between myself and that now?
Love it.
Because this moment is a moving path and it holds us all. And if I can contribute peace to this moment, which is all I have, then that is at least real. Anything I can contribute to the future is really in conceptual space, and I can't know how it will play out, how it will end. I can picture wonderful scenarios of me in a Wonder Woman costume saving the world, but I don't know how these things, how those things will play out. What I do know,
I totally get you, you know, I totally get you. I totally receive that.
Pardon?
I totally receive that. You know, we talked about respecting people we disagree with, but boy, do I agree with you. Like, to bring my energy to this moment, sure, I can have an intention, but, you know, it'll work out the way it works out. And I can stay open-hearted, and I can stay anxiety-free, and I'm pretty good at it. And that's really where it's at. Life is right here and not right now. And so, you know, that doesn't freeze me out from having intentions. And,
absolutely not. But if my peace is conditional in this moment, what are my conditions? Here and now, what are my conditions?
I couldn't agree more. I couldn't agree more.
You know, Richard, you said something a moment ago which I won't be able to exactly I'm going to frame it in the way that I heard it, and that's to say that there is one level at which we perceive action, and we can look at it through some higher cosmic consciousness or higher mind, so to speak, and say everything is perfect as it is. And yet, at this dimensional level, we have to be really cognizant of where we are, that we exist within a third dimensional reality where the impact of choices, the impact of the things that we do may not exactly play itself out in a seemingly perfect way. It will play itself out in one way or another. And yet, where do we fit into that relationship of how everything is playing out around us? That's what I try to really pay attention to. I think Abby really tries to pay attention to that, is a recognition that sometimes you're the eye of the hurricane or the eye of the tornado, and you have to be really aware that your piece can simultaneously create a lot of chaos around you. So we have to be aware of that simultaneously at a number of different levels. How are we being informed, but simultaneously, how are we having an impact in the external world?
Yeah, it's not a get out of jail free card for bad behaviour. Well,
Correct.
when I say bad, I mean what feels, what intuitively is felt to be creating
Right.
suffering and painful inside me. And so it doesn't mean you're not very aware of how you go into interactions with others and what your impacts are on the world, but just as a way of being in the moment, not looking for any particular outcome. And in that way, I guess that's what I mean by saying I'm not looking to make a mark on the world. I have no condition for an outcome for my behaviour. It's just my behaviour as it flows into the moment, and
Right.
I care about it, I guess is what I'm saying. I do care. It doesn't mean that I don't care and that I think whatever I do is fine. On one level, it is, and I have a lifetime of evidence to kind of back that up if my mind wanted to go to evidence. But as you become more aware in general, and as you get more peace in general, and that brings a little bit of stillness and space into your life, you do notice very much how what you're putting into the world, how it ripples out, and how it feels on the inside. And that is enough, I think, for me anyway, to navigate by. Navigate by compassion. And it doesn't come in terms of specific behaviours. So I find I don't question other people's behaviours. I don't expect a lot of what people call spiritual, for example, is just lifestyle choices. And a lot of people with certain lifestyle choices believe that they're the only way to be, and that creates a lack of peace around them when they encounter other people and project their choices onto others. And that's something that I'm careful also about not doing. I'm aware that what I do is just my lifestyle choice. I'm aware that my interest in existence is just a hobby like any other hobby. And I also, I try not to bore people with my hobby as much as I would if I was into train spotting, maybe. Which is why I'm talking to you people and not people who aren't interested or who may not be interested. So, yeah, I'm not any kind of crusader, I guess, because of that felt sense that I may not have things down. Who knows? I might disagree completely with everything I say in the next moment. So who am I to push that onto others? My interest in sharing is just my personal fascination with this existence.
Yet you have to
It's
push.
not-
You,
yes.
you have to push in a way. I mean, you don't have to, but I mean, in order to probe something, you have to push against it, right? And then you can suggest other people to push against some things that they're standing on. And then that might look like you're pushing something on them, but it really, the outcome doesn't much that matter, you know. But if they, okay, I've been pushing on things that you guys have said, you know, it all came out the way I liked, you know, so then that's okay, right? But somehow, it's a beautiful agreement, you know, that I don't know, I agree, I totally resonate with everything that was said here tonight, and really thank both of you, and I'm sure that it'll be very impactful.
Thank you, Richard, and especially thank you for letting me have the opportunity to talk to you. But no offense, but also especially to Abby. It's been really great.
Yeah, it's been really lovely just sharing our hobby. It's been a real joy, and
thank you, AbiTiki.
yeah, I appreciate this opportunity just to have a chat, and it's lovely to. It's actually quite strange to meet someone for the first time face to face and have a chat and be filmed while doing it. So,
And
it's been strangely enjoyable.
and thank you, Jerome Pindell.
It is.
Thanks, Richard and Jerry.
And thanks everybody for coming and checking us out. And who knows? Every once in a while we'll be doing things like this. I'm kind of a pushover as far as suggestibility. So anyone got any ideas? Go for it. You know. And so bye for now.
Well, thank you again, Richard, and especially for having Abby on. Yeah, it really felt great to be able to have this conversation. So appreciate it.
I actually feel quite honoured to find that you suggested me, and I've just really enjoyed having a date with you and having a chat. After several years of being friends, it's kind of strange, but it's really nice. So, Richard, I really appreciate you making it possible, and Rena as well for being involved in the whole thing.
Fantastic. Okay, thanks everybody. Thanks, Rena.
Yeah.